Around the world, school attendance is at its highest level. But attendance is followed by another, more important question.
How do I know that my students are learning? What do I do when my students are not learning? And what else can I do if they have mastered the learning?
Why does learning matter?
What we found from experience, not just from saying it, is that when children learn, we've prospered.
We need to teach our learners to become critical thinkers because they're going to be the future of South Africa. They need to build this country up. And that's our job in the classrooms, to make sure that they do that.
This is a silent revolution where I think we can empower people.
Empowering people, raising children up to their full potential, transforming societies in a generation. That is what learning can make happen. But what can make learning happen?
The most important thing is that countries make learning the priority. Countries need to measure whether students are learning it or not, and then use that information to improve student learning.
But many countries are in the dark, unaware whether their children are learning. The solution lies in turning on the light, measuring learning in order to better understand how to ensure it is happening. Because when children learn, nations prosper. Race riots, high unemployment, illiteracy, an uneducated workforce. It is Singapore in 1965, the year it became an independent nation. At just 640 square kilometers, it is one of the smallest nations in the world.
In 1965, without a hinterland, without an export market, we had to export to the world as our market. And for that, we had to have a skilled manpower base. And so we had to turn around the situation very quickly.
They did. In a generation, Singapore has gone from a low-income to a high-income country, and one ranked as the most competitive country in the world. How did they do it? By developing one of the world's best education systems, and by giving priority to learning and measuring learning.
What Singapore did is they were able to bring everyone to pay attention to learning and to knowing whether for each student, for each parent, who has succeeded and who has not.
In the Singapore system, we have this idea that every child can learn, every child should learn.
We've learned at every stage of the game that getting kids to learn as well as they can is what gives us that extra lift in the next stage of development.
Measuring whether students are learning, or assessment, is a very important part of the Singaporean system.
One reason I think why Singapore system has succeeded is examinations. It gives clarity to the system, meaning to students, to teachers, to parents.
To a teacher, it is important because it tells me what else I need to do. To the policymakers, it's important because it tells them have the programs that they are implementing working well.
In the 1960s, when we started a common examination for 12-year-olds, I think only slightly above half passed the examination. In other words, based on the examination, they shouldn't have gone to secondary school.
Today, more than 97% pass the primary school leaving exam, the PSLE. And nearly all children go on to secondary school.
Assessment's a very important part of our system. Making very clear what the hurdle is in primary schools and high schools is also a great motivator for every student. He knows or she knows how high you've got to jump.
PSLE is definitely a high-stakes exam to everyone. To the child, it is so important because it will determine to a large extent where you will go to in secondary school.
Assessment has many purposes in Singapore's education system. It tells policymakers how students are performing, helps to motivate students. It selects students for advancement. And that's not all.
Our examinations allow us to be able to spot the abilities of the children. Based on these examinations, we tailor the teaching to the child's ability.
One hallmark of Singapore's world-class education system is the goal of learning for all children. So, what happens when a child does not pass the PSLE?
When the result come out, I didn't do well and they put there fail. Everything was dark and I have no future. There's no other opportunity for me.
Hamka Jafar is one of the 2.7% who did not pass. And he is an example of how Singapore has come face to face with a simple question. How do you make sure everyone learns, not just those who pass a formal assessment?
They just fail one major exams, but it doesn't mean that they have failed in life.
Yen Chi Chua would enter Hamka's life at this crucial moment, and it would be an example of how Singapore's education system ensures opportunity for every child.
What we're trying to do throughout the school system, it's about developing children who are enthusiastic about life and all the possibilities that it can bring, so that kids will come out of school, enter the workforce, and have a toolkit of skills that really counts for something in the market.
For Hamka, it starts here. Northlight Secondary School, where Singapore's new way of looking at learning begins.
I'm Yen Ching. I'm the principal of Northlight. Our main target group of students are those who repeatedly fail their primary school leaving exams, and they feel very discouraged. The first step that we have started to do was to help the students to redefine success.
Hamka was invited to consider Northlight.
Northlight, we have a very strong focus in character education because we believe that at the end of the day, it's your character and your attitude towards work that will really see you through. And since a big percentage of our students will be going out to the workplace, we have to kick in the vocational education modules. At the end of the day, the skills can help them to get a job, but their character and their attitude will help them to sustain in a job.
And in the end, it was Hamka's goal to get into Singapore's technical college, the ITE. And after 3 years at Northlight, he took his ITE entrance exams. His sister was as anxious for the test results as he was.
My big sister, she always asking me, how's your result, how's your result, how's your result? I get a good years and pass in ITE, I first will call my sister.
When we see Hamka being successful, even through the eyes of one child, it just shows that our effort and our time is really worth it, because then one child can then influence and affect many more children.
His success also reflects on Northlight.
One of the things that I did when I selected Mrs. Choi was to choose one of our most reputed school principals to run a school that would have been regarded in some systems as being at the periphery. Because it wasn't at the periphery for us, it was right there in the center.
And Northlight, in turn, reflects well on the value of assessments.
Assessment is not just saying you're good at this, you're not good at this. It is saying that and then providing options.
And it shows how putting learning for all at the top of a nation's priorities can pay off.
That's what makes Singapore the country that it is today, that it pays attention to the potential contribution that every single student has to contribute to his or her own success as well as the success of the country.
Singapore is unique, but not alone in its focus on learning. Half a world away, an African nation has similar aspirations as the Singapore of yesterday and is giving priority to quality education as a means to get there. Here, the focus is on transforming what happens in the classroom to ensure that learning takes place. This is St. Anne's Primary School in Attridgeville Township, South Africa. Most of its students come from squatter camps or live in makeshift housing. One such student is Shego Fatso. He was illiterate, and to his teacher, Florence, he seemed unable to learn.
So Fatso was very dull, didn't want to talk, always crying.
But Florence was unable to assess why Shego Fatso was having difficulty. Melanie Pillay is Florence's head of department. And she noticed the problem wasn't just with Florence, it was with the system.
The children, they're not learning in the classroom. They come into school and they're not learning, they're not doing anything.
Then, a simple change. An opportunity to train teachers like Florence in how to assess whether her students are learning. Florence jumped at the chance. The class taught Florence and other primary school teachers how to measure learning in their classrooms, informally.
When she came back after a week and gave us a report, she said it changed her outlook on the kids, it changed her outlook on teaching.
An example of one of Florence's new methods starts simple. Who can count and how high? And she uses an everyday object.
We use these bottle tops to count. Hooray! Another one. I always write some letters to the parents. Please save that bottle top for my little one to come to school. Right? Group 6. Count from 1 up to 10. You mustn't let them see that you are looking at them, because some of them, they won't be able to count. I'll peep and pass. Always peep and pass.
If you're given an assessment in the classroom and you're doing group work, you can tell whether a learner knows what's going on or not by looking at their facial expression. If you ask questions in the class, who's taking part in the discussion, whose hands are being raised to answer you. It's an informal assessment that you're doing in the classroom.
Now, simple techniques are making a difference and improving classroom learning. Once Florence began regularly checking in with her students, she was able to spot small signs of large problems. But what about Shego Fatso? Armed with the new skills learned from the assessment workshop, Florence realized that to help him learn, she needed to find out what was the barrier to learning.
Then I started calling the granny, interviewing the granny, wanted to know what is happening with the child. And the granny told me that the mother's child is deceased. Then I started to see that there is a problem here. And this year, I saw a miracle from this child. So far, couldn't write, couldn't do anything. But this year, so far, will be the first child in my class. Very bright this year.
It's not because there's something wrong with him that he cannot do it. He's just got so many challenges that he has to deal with outside of school And then to come to school and we expect him to do all of these amazing things, you know, we've got to also learn how to teach these kids as well.
It's a remarkable turnaround for Scegofatso and for Florence. He's learned how to learn. She's relearned how to teach.
I love walking in your class. It's colorful, the kids are working, there's group work going on, there's activities going on. So there's such a big difference from what was and what is now in our classes.
I started to be a new teacher and a new educator altogether, and enjoying my teaching.
Si yo soy Belisario Giraldo Ochoa. Me hubiera gustado mucho porque aprendió a leer y escribir. La ciudad es dura para la persona que es analfabeto. Y me dediqué al campo. La vida de un cultivador de café es aprender el café, el grano rojo que es el maduro. El grano cuando está ya de coger el rojo. Yo trabajo de las 6:30 de la mañana hasta las 7, 8 de la noche. Yo no soy rico ni mucho, pero entonces yo trabajando, yo me consigo para el bachiller.
A mí me gusta más la escuela, que en la escuela vienen muchos niños de diferentes colores, ciudades, edades. Entonces en la escuela uno aprende a convivir con esas personas y uno lo que aprende aquí, entonces va y lo explica allá en la casa.
Like South Africa, the South American nation of Colombia has come to recognize that its rural children need a pathway out of poverty, and that good education and learning for all hold the key. Colombia's rural schools suffered during decades of conflict. Farmers like Belisario were robbed of a quality education.
The conditions, schools not attracting children, schools not adapted to the needs of children in the rural context, no learning materials, teachers that were not motivated at all, very traditional, memoristic, teacher-centered. Children didn't learn anything, no results.
But now, in the coffee-planted hills outside Armenia, Colombia, rural learning is flourishing.
We had to change everything. It was a whole systemic approach. We really started to focus on having results.
Vicky Colbert has helped create a new way of learning by centering classroom instruction on the student rather than the teacher.
Most of the schools are in remote areas are multi-grade, 1 or 2 teachers working with the whole classroom.
Across rural Colombia, what happens in the classroom is being transformed through a non-traditional approach that focuses squarely on learning.
One of the most important parts of Escuela Nueva is the learning guide. It's a workbook series that takes the entire curriculum and breaks it down into single bite-sized pieces.
Escuela Nueva means new school, and the learning guide is an example of the innovative learning materials that children use to take responsibility for their own learning.
They learn the content, they apply the lesson, and at the end, they test themselves and see if they're ready to move on to the next unit.
The learning is self-paced, reinforced by self-testing. Studies show that this self-testing improves learning. Belisario's daughter, Jessica, attends a school called Antonio Requarte. Jessica has a long walk to school, but the walk is well worth it.
Esta es el álbum de fotografías, que aquí están todas las fotografías de todos los años que he asistido a la escuela. Este es mi vereda Alto del Río, el otro croquis, que aquí se ve toda la vereda del Alto del Río. Esta es la huerta escolar.
Her teacher is Jaime Guevara.
Él hace Escuela Nueva el trabajo en equipo, el trabajo cooperativo, ¿sí? Y no solamente en los niños, también con la comunidad.
Getting parental buy-in to connect them to their children's education is an important part. And today, Jessica's father has come to teach her class. Much of the learning in Escuela Nueva comes this way, from peers and the community, with the teacher as facilitator.
What you see in community after community is parents excited about the fact that their children are learning. They recognize that this means that their children have the opportunity to go on to further education, to contribute more to their own household, to their own family's future, and ultimately to their country's success.
Que ella quisiera ser doctora de medicina es algo que yo sé que con lo poquito que yo gano, yo puedo costearlo más adelante. Yo sueño de que yo tengo la capacidad en el campo, conseguir la plata para yo pagarle a ella, para que ella pueda estudiar en la universidad.
What Singapore, South Africa, and Colombia have in common is that each has recognized that learning for all is a priority, and each is taking steps to make sure it happens. In Singapore, national examinations have contributed importantly to economic success, and the country is increasingly emphasizing strategies to help even struggling students learn and become productive. In South Africa, training teachers to informally assess their students and turn on the lights is bringing results in the classroom. And in Colombia, child-centered learning is transforming rural schooling and helping children realize dreams beyond the farm. As a result, students like Hamka, Shegofatso, and Jessica are on the crest of a new worldwide emphasis on learning.
What we see in each of these cases is that learning is the be-all and end-all of the education process. And with learning, children can be successful, countries can grow. It's the center and the beginning and the end of the education cycle. It's the purpose of education.
For a country's leaders, the question is no longer, are all our kids in school?
Why are learners not achieving in the classroom? Why are schools underperforming? That's why assessment is so important, because we need to report back to everybody, all the stakeholders, and each of them have such an important part to play to ensure that the learners do achieve.
When children learn,
when children learn,
when children learn,
when children learn, nations prosper.